I'm Nancy McNally of NancyMcNallyQuilts.com. So what we're going to learn today is we're going to learn how to create this sewing machine organizer pad. We're going to make pockets, we're going to bind, and we're going to make a sewing thread. All your threads, you know, that you trim up. So this is a nice little thread catcher. If you have any scraps, you can throw it in there too. Also, can you see my little button right here? We're going to make a button cover. So our first step for assembling our sewing machine organizer pad is we're going to take our C squares and we're going to join them end to end to make our banner strip that runs between pieces A and B. Once you sew all those together, you're going to press all the seam allowances in one direction. They don't have to match up to anything. So I already have mine all joined together. So your next step will be to join your C squares to your A and B section. So it's going to go in between. And then once you do that, you're going to press your seam allowances. And next step, we're going to make the quilt sandwich. So let me get mine joined and then we'll move on to the next section. In our next step, after you have completed the top of our sewing machine organizer pad, you're going to need your backing fabric, your batting, and binding. Isn't this cute, this polka dot? All right, so we're going to make a quilt sandwich, and we are going to quilt it. Now, I'm going to use my walking foot, which this one's mine. So for the quilting portion of this, you need to use your walking foot, or if you would like, you can use your free motion foot, but I'm just going to use my walking foot. And I will prep my machine for that in just a few moments. So we're going to take our top. I'm just going to drape it across my machine. I'm going to take the backing. Now, my backing is slightly larger than the top. So I'm leaving the selvage on and I'll trim it off in just a little bit. So you're going to lay out your backing. And if you need to, you can use a little spray starch if you can't get the stubborn wrinkles out. Lay out your batting. We want everything to be nice and smooth. Now my sewing machine's in the way, so I'll have to move things over in just a minute. But I think you understand. You get the gist of it. Smooth it all out nice and neat. Make sure there's no wrinkles underneath while you're straightening out your batting. Then you're going to take your top. I'm going to place it right back. There we go, just like this. Now where did that selvage go? Okay, the selvage is down there, so I'm going to raise this up just a tiny portion to make sure. Whoops, there we go. If you need to put a few pins in place, then by all means, put some pins in to make sure that it doesn't move. Okay, next we need to set up our machine for quilting. So again, if you need to, go find your walking foot. You can use a regular foot, but I can't guarantee that you'll have success with that. And you're going to need matching thread. I'm using a neutral thread that's cream colored to match the background. At this point in time, you can quilt straight lines on the vertical or horizontal, or you can free motion quilt, or you can quilt giant X's. You can do whatever you want, but you do need to do some quilting in the top and the bottom. If you do not, and you wash this, or even wear and tear because you're using the machine often, the batting will begin to separate. That's why we quilt it. So make sure you put enough quilting stitches in there to hold and secure your batting in place. On this organization pad, you can see that I chose a different type of quilting stitch. I use one of my built-in stitches, which is just the serpentine stitch, and I just I serpentine stitched about every 2 inches all the way down. Now, on this one, I wanted to show you that I stitched really close together. They're about 1/2 inch, sometimes they're 3/4 of an inch. all the way across the mat. I really like this type of quilting, but at the same time, if you want to use something, a stitch that's built into your machine, have at it, have fun with it. This is a great way to learn how to use your stitches in your machine. So now let's move on to the next step, which is this pocket down here. All right, so let's gather our fabrics for that. For our pocket, we're going to need D and E fabrics and our batting that matches the same size of fabric D. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to place your batting first on your table. Next, we're going to place our D, smooth it out, no wrinkles. And next, we're going to go right sides together. Now, this is where you need to pay attention. If you've chosen a directional fabric, make sure that when you place this right sides together, and I have a big wrinkle in mine. Let's get that wrinkle out. So when we construct the pocket and we flip it right side out, if your E fabric is directional, you're going to want to make sure that you have it going in the right direction before we construct it, okay? All right, so let's go these. Join these together. Now E is slightly smaller, it's not as wide as D. So our first step is we are going to join. We're going to run a stitch along the top, and we're going to go through all of our layers. Now, I'm going to move my needle over one position. I had to put my needle back to the original, the default setting, because it was still set on the serpentine stitch that I used in the quilting. Now we're going to run a stitch through our E, D, and our batting fabrics. Stitch right over there at the top. After you've sewn our 3 layers together at the top, your next step is going to be to trim the batting away. So what I like to do is I'm going to hold it back. I'm going to start by putting a ruler right here. Now I've already started it, but I want to show you what I do. And I take and I move my ruler along, and I'm going to use my rotary cutter, and I'm just going to do little bits at a time. All right, so you're going to finish trimming the batting away, and then we're going to move on to the next portion of making our pocket. After you trim your batting away from the seam allowance, next you're going to take your E fabric and you're going to press like this, okay? Because you want the seam allowance to go towards E. So let's do that quickly. All right, so now our next step is we're going to take our E fabric, this raw edge right here, and we're going to match it to our D edge down here. So the batting is going to show up at the top, just like this. So in order to keep it aligned, you can either use clips or pins, whatever's easiest for you. And I have a couple clips here. I like using the clips when it's really thick. And we're going to stitch down the left side. So you want to make sure that seam allowance is going towards you when you've got your clips in. So we're going to stitch down this side over here. There we go, keep it aligned. And I'm actually going to stitch it this way. And I'm going to, with my fingers, I'm making sure the seam allowance is still coming towards me. I'm going to take this foot off, and I'm going to put my standard foot on just because of the bulk. I don't want the batting getting stuck on my fabric guide of my 1/4 inch foot. Okay, so I'm going to line it. Here we go. Now we're going to stitch down. There it goes. Now you can remove these clips. Oops. And the side that we just stitched, the left side, let's trim this corner right here so that when we turn it right side out, there won't be all this bulk here. Doesn't take a whole lot because you don't want to cut into your stitching, your thread. So I have a bone tool that I'm going to use, and we're going to turn this right side out, and I'm going to use the bone tool to push that corner out. But first, let's do this, bring it all out, turn it right side out. There, nice, nice, nice. Okay, now see how this corner isn't, it doesn't look like a good corner. So I'm going to use my bone tool, very gently insert and just push that fabric, that seam out. So now it looks like a nicer seam, a nicer corner. All right, there we go. Okay, our next step is we need to baste around our edges, and we're going to stitch in the ditch again, and you're going to stitch in the ditch right here. So if you need to change your threads to match it, go ahead and do so now. Your pocket should look like this, and you should have your D fabric showing at the top. It kind of looks like a binding. Okay, now that I finished my pocket, I basted along the edge here on the raw edge and up the side. And let's talk about why we did that. So we are going to align our pocket with our sewing pad. All right, let me bring mine over here. And we're going to align raw edge to raw edge. And so we need to secure these edges so that nothing frays or nothing stays out of a line. So you should be able to have yours just like this. And then you need to decide how many pockets. Now I bring mine over here. There's 4 shown in the original, and I made an extra one. I made 5 pockets in mine. So you can decide whatever you want to do. My suggestion is to just measure, just take a ruler and measure how wide you think you're going to need. Maybe take some items and place them on here. It's like, what are things that I use most of the time? Let's see here. Oh, we always need our, where is it? Ah, here it is. These are some of my favorite tools. Now I'm not going to put one of my rotary cutters in here. This and this and this. A ruler. So maybe you can have these two. Put and see, we can do that. And you always want to put the safety on there first before you stick these in here because they will poke through the fabric. Okay, gather your items that you use most of the time and mark where you want your stitch lines, and I will use my ruler for that, and I will use this marking pen to do that. And then we will sew a stitch here and to secure this, and then we will sew wherever you mark, you are going to sew on that marked line. Now when you do that, you want to make sure that you lock those stitches and you secure it. So I would stitch a few stitches forward and a few stitches back, and then go forward again and do the same thing at the top and at the base. If you need to, put your walking foot back on because this is very bulky, and so is this right here. I had trouble with my machine just using my regular foot, so I had to switch over to my walking foot to finish my pocket. So let's mark. I think these can go in the same pocket, but I want to measure my tool. I would like at least, because we're going to have a stitch line over here, so I would go like right about here. And I'm not going to evenly space mine because I have different types of tools that I use. Maybe you want to put a pocket in there for your cell phone. So, okay, so that's about 3.5 inches, and or excuse me, 2.5 inches, and we'll do another one at 2.5 inches. Oops. Okay, let's move this, and keep them going. There we go. And then I will use my spray bottle to take the marks away. All right, I'm going to divide this one. Actually, I'm going to leave it because I have to have room over here for the binding. So your next step is, I really think you should put your walking foot on, and we're going to stitch these out. Anytime you change from your regular standard feet to a walking foot and you have to screw it in, just make sure that you screw it in very tightly. Okay, I'm going to put a few of my Wonder Clips, or my clips, onto, I'm lining it up so that they won't move. All right, so let's do the first one. I'm starting at the bottom, and I'm going to stitch forward a few stitches, and then I'm going to stitch back to lock them in because we want it to be strong, especially at the top. And don't forget, you might want to choose a matching thread or a thread that will blend in. Oops, let's remove that because that makes it go crooked. One more time. Okay, just move it over once you do that and continue on. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remove my blue lines before I can finish sewing this down on the other side. So I'm just going to mist it with water just so you can see the blue lines vanish. There we go. Let it kind of just dry for a minute, and then you can put the iron to it and it'll be all gone and dry. All right, so let's move on to the next step. Don't forget, you need to stitch this side down too. I just didn't do that because I wanted to show you how to remove the lines. The next step will be to bind your organizer pad. If you would like to machine bind both sides of the binding, you want to sew it to the back first, and then you're going to roll it to the front to secure it. All right, so let me show you how this works. So I leave this sitting over here to my side. I've got it all rolled up on here, and as the machine is feeding everything through, it just feeds off. And this stays in place, it doesn't move, and I have no troubles. And then when it gets to the end, I just unclip and finish sewing it on. So there you go. Just thought I'd offer you that little tip today. To make our scrap basket, which I also called a thread basket, we are going to need our F and G fabric squares, or excuse me, rectangles, and we are going to need our fusible fleece, which if you've never worked with this, it has fusible glue on one side. So how do you tell the difference? One side is nice and smooth, and the other side has all these little bumpies on here. You can see them, that's your glue. So let's start with our F fabric, which is going to be the exterior of your basket. And you want to take and fuse that fabric to the fleece batting. Now I have both of my F pieces fused to the fleece. And our next step is we are going to cut two 2-inch squares out of both of our bottom corners. Now if your fabric's directional, make sure that you're cutting it out of the bottom so you've got your motif going in the right direction. So just use your ruler. Make sure I have the right amount. 2 inches, okay. I just take my ruler, and what we're doing is we're making boxed corners. You're going to cut and then cut Ta-da! Okay, repeat it on the other corner. Now I go slightly, just a smidge past the 2-inch mark so that I can completely cut the square out. Now we want to repeat with the other section. So we have our 2 cut. With right sides facing, we're going to stitch along both sides and the bottom. Don't mess with these corners. So we're going to make our boxed corners, and they look like this. Isn't that neat? I love this method. All right, let's stitch. Remember, we're going to stitch both sides. Don't do the box where we just cut out the 2-inch squares. Now we need to press our seams, and you're going to need to press these open. So be very careful with this because this is pretty thick. So how I do it is I press it with my fingers first to go ahead and get it started, flatten it out, and then press. And make sure that your iron doesn't touch. Just use the tip of that iron. You're going to do both sides, and then we're going to make our boxed corners. All right, got that one. Now, you're going to take your boxed corner, your squares. Did you see how I did that? So there's our corner right there. You pull these apart so you can match these seam allowances, or excuse me, your seams. Whoops, I flipped it, didn't I? Fingernails do not work. All right, so we're going to mash these together. There we go. And I'm going to use a clip to hold them in place. You want to align the your stitched area, your stitch seams. It's like this. And then we're going to stitch our 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. Just kind of squish this down, get it out of your way. Now reinforce your corners by stitching forward and then stitching backward and then stitching forward again. When you get to the other side, do the same thing to reinforce your corners. Now let's go do our other boxed corner. We'll repeat the process. We're going to pull these out like this so we can match those stitch seams. Okay, I'm going to use a wonder clip to hold my seams in place. It's very bulky, and now we're going to stitch across this way. All right, so now we're going to do, and it looks like this. Isn't that neat? It just stands up on its own. Okay, so now we're going to turn the basket right side out. So just reach in and turn it right side out, just like that. Your next step, you need to prepare your H strip, and that is your handle. Now, if you look at the pattern page, if you look on step 4, we are that is your little handle that you're going to loop around your button. So you're going to fold your strip in half along the length. Do that first. Give it a nice press, and then you're going to open it up, and then you're going to take and you're going to fold your raw edges to that center and press them. Do that on both sides. Sometimes I will take some pins and press them into my where I'm folding these narrow seams like this, making these small handles. I will press them into, let me bring it over here so I can show you. There, just like that. See how I'm holding the one side that I've already pressed? I'm just using the pins so that I don't have to, try to fiddle with it too much. And then we're going to fold the other side to it. And take another, set a couple pins. Just helps to hold it in place because it's a small piece. One more. And especially if you have a hard time holding small things with your fingers, this is a great way to hold it in place. And you know what? I'm sure spray starch would work too. There. Okay, now we're going to unpin and you're going to fold it over. So now all raw edges along the length are secured inside. So I'm going to put a pin right here, put a pin right here. It just makes it so much easier. And press in place. There we go. So your next step will be to run a stitch along. There we go. To run a stitch right along this folded edge. There we go. Okay, so you want to trim your loose threads. Oop. And next we are going to find the center of our basket. We're going to secure our loop to the basket. I'm just looking for a clip to hold it. There we go. So I'm going to go like this. I got these together. And this is where the center is. Let's put it on this one right here. Hold that. I just pinched it together. And we're going to, you place it down, and so you want it to make a loop, so you kind of make them look like an X, and then you're going to secure that in place. Before I sew the handle onto the scrap basket, I removed the base of my sewing machine, so or the arm. Let me pull it out and show you. So if you have this ability, that really makes it easy to do this. So then you can just slide it over. A lot of sewing machines you can do this with. You just remove that base. Okay, so I have pinned the handle in place, and now I'm going to stitch over it, and you just want to stitch over it a couple times to reinforce it. That's all, because it's going to, oh, I got to take off this pin. There we go. Because what's going to happen is it's going to get some abuse, if you will, because it's going to go around the button. So I'm going to go back over it. There we go. All right. So see, there we go. And that's great. You just remove that. Okay, don't forget, if you have that on your sewing machine, you can do that. That's a nice feature, because we're going to be sewing when we join the lining with the exterior part of our scrap basket. This is nice to be able to just move it right on over. Okay, so I'm just going to place this on the floor and hope I don't kick it. There we go. Now I noticed that my fleece is starting to come loose right here, so I'm going to put the iron to it again and secure that in place one more time. That just happens. The heat must not have went all the way through. Much better. Okay, so now let's move on to our lining piece. So for the lining, we're going to cut two 2-inch corners, just like we did before, out of both pieces of our lining. So I'm going to leave my lining stacked on top of each other. Align my ruler. And we're going to cut. Next, we need to join our lining pieces. We're going to go right sides together. We're going to sew the same seams as we did before, the 2 side seams and then the seam across the bottom. And I'm just going to use my clips to hold it in place. I'm not going to put my my base back on. I'm going to leave it off. So my 1/4 inch seam, now for the bottom, we need to leave an opening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a pin. We need about a 4-inch wide opening. So take your hand and lay it on there and go, okay, that's about a 4-inch wide opening, because you need to be able to, we're going to pull the basket through the opening. So there's a lot of bulk in here, so you want to give yourself enough room. So I place pins into where I want to start and stop for sewing. I don't want to sew in here. I'm going to sew over here and over here. Next step is we're going to box our corners. So you remember how we pulled them like this and we matched our seams. Now we need to press these seams open. So make sure you get these seams open before you do your boxed seam or boxed corners. So your 1/4 inch seam, don't forget to reinforce it. Repeat and do the other boxed corner. Now that we have finished piecing, boxing our corners, and sewing up our side seams of our lining fabric, we're going to insert our exterior inside of our lining. So we're going to go just like this. You're going to match up your side seams. Do that first. So match them up and make sure they stay open. Again, you can use pins or you can use your clips. Sometimes you might have to push it down in there just a little bit. I'm going to line these up. We're going to put one over here. Now this one over here, this isn't as thick as the side, so I'm good with using a pin. Same thing over here, and make sure that your handle is inside. And let me find another big pin. There we go. Okay, now we're going to sew around our exterior edge. So we're going to place it under, and if you need a walking foot, you'll know in just a second, basically. All right, so there we go. All right. Because it might get really, really thick at the side seams. You want to remove your clips or your pins as you get close. Hopefully it'll just sew right through. Yay! And notice how I've put it over the arm and it's just pulling it through nicely and I'm not having to fight with it. We'll come back around. You want to lock your stitch in. Okay, so now that we've done this, now our next step is we're going to turn it right side out. So we're going to reach in through that opening in the bottom and we're going to pull our exterior out. And then we'll push the lining inside. Ta-da! There we go. And then you want to stick this inside. Ta-da! And you also want to, before you do that, you want to slip stitch your opening closed. I'm just going to go ahead and put mine in so that we can move on to our next step. Now, for stitching that closed, you're going to have to use a needle and thread. You're going to hand stitch. If you prefer and you can figure out a way to do it by machine, go for it. Not a problem. So our next step will be to stitch in the ditch all the way around the edge of our basket. But you want to make sure that everything is all lined up. Just keep working at it inside, and there we go. It's all lined up, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to place it underneath here. Now, I currently have on a 1/4-inch foot with a fabric guide, and I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to put a standard basic foot on there. So we're going to take this, and needle's going to go just like we did before. The needle's going to go right into where the fabric has folded over, and it's going inside the lining fabric. So it's like you're stitching in the ditch. And you're just going to work your way all the way around. Just keep pulling it around until you get all the way around to the other side. Isn't it cute? I just love it. I think it's so adorable. Okay, so our next step is to make the button. Once you open up your button cover kit, you're going to find 2 different types of buttons in there. We do not want this one, okay? This one has no way right now to attach the button the way we need to. So we're going to move that one aside. So we're going to use these 3 pieces. So we have our mold. This is actually our button, and this is what they call the pusher or the plunger. You're going to take and you want to pull this one out. There we go. You want to separate them. If you need to use tweezers, use tweezers. You're going to cut your fabric in a circle that's large enough to insert in here into the mold. Place your top portion just like that. You want to make sure that you get all of the fabric for the button inside your mold. Next, pick up the backing. You're going to place it on top, and again, make sure that all the fabric is placed into, oops, and see, I didn't have a piece. Let me pull this back out. There we go. This piece was coming out right here. So let me grab it with my tweezers. There we go. Push that down in there. I'm going to push it with the pusher piece. There you go. Oopsie. There, it pops in place. You'll feel it. It pops in place. There it is. And so now you can just take the mold and pull it away, and your button will come out. How cute is that? Oops, I have some little fuzzies on there. So now you're going to hand sew with needle and thread your button in place, and you want to put it in between 1, 2, 3, 2 and 3. Put it right there so that it's in between, and then you'll take your basket, your scrap basket, and it hooks just like that, and then it'll hang down nicely in front of your sewing machine, and you can fit all your favorite tools. You can slide them all inside. Yay! We made our sewing machine organization pad. Thank you for joining me today.